unmute. We're going to go ahead and get started. Very, very excited. I've been receiving a ton of feedback, and we've been talking about doing labs for quite a while now. And I've been having a lot of my clients go, will you please do this with Dr. Krause? We want to see what this looks like. I've had people reaching out. So I finally got my shit together, and Dr. Krause agreed to jump on and do this with us. So I'm pretty excited to be able to bring this to you guys today. For a lot of you who are newer, don't know who we are, I'm going to do a quick 60-second introduction. My name is Jannine Krause. I have been in the fitness and health industry for just under 30 years now. Pretty much anything in the industry, you name it, I've done it. But specifically in the last 10 years, my focus has been very much in teaching and working with women on how the metabolism actually works. And it's not the way that we're taught how to lose weight and how this works actually doesn't work, and it causes a lot of hormonal disruption in females. So I've been working with women on that and teaching them how their hormones are impacted. And I think that passion grew as my age went up and I started experiencing some of these things too. And having some feedback. That's kind of weird. Okay. So that's kind of where I'm at. In the last 10 years, that's really been the focus. Now, how I met Dr. Krause is I'm currently 51. And I will say that up until this last year, most of my perimenopausal symptoms were pretty mild. Yeah, I had a drop in libido. Yeah, I didn't have the energy that I used to have, but they were pretty well managed through lifestyle. I am very much a lifestyle first kind of gal. And that's where I always started. That being said, I'd say last year is when I noticed the periods became irregular. And I was like, okay, I think like I'm in perimenopause now, but it was still pretty manageable. And then in November, December of last year, I felt like my legs just got taken out from underneath me. Despite all of my lifestyle factors that I was implementing, like I just got hit hard. And I even actually made the list. Like, yes, I already had the painful periods and the irregular periods, but my sleep became so disrupted that I was maybe getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. I would wake up in the morning and just be bawling because I was so exhausted. I was on this huge emotional roller coaster where one minute I was crying, the next I was raging. All of my motivation for anything was gone. Growing my business, working out, all of the things that I love doing, I just didn't care anymore. And I knew that that wasn't really me. Joint pain, and not just like back, hips, knees. I'm 6'2", I'm kind of used to that kind of joint pain. I'm talking about wrist pain. My fingers ached, my ankles hurt. Things that didn't used to hurt just ached all the time. And on top of that, I had an 8-pound gain in my weight, which is unusual for me, in what seemed like overnight. It just came on, and I was miserable. Now, the good news is that I had already had a little bit of experience with Dr. Krause because one of my clients had actually found her. And one of the things that I loved was that she specifically does a test called a Dutch test, which I was really interested in. And the other thing that I loved about what Dr. Krause did was that based on the feedback that I was getting, she was very thorough with my client. And so it really helped me put all the pieces together because I'm lifestyle, but I needed those hormonal panels done correctly. And with all of my clients previous to this, I knew there was always gaps and I was always trying to guess. And now I had somebody that wasn't going to guess, that they were going to do the test that we needed and help fill in those gaps. So I'm super, super excited to be able to do this with Dr. Krause, introduce her to you. Dr. Krause, I'm going to have you go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll get started.
Hey, everybody. Yep. I'm Dr. Jannine Krause. I'm a naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, and podcaster. And yeah, love talking hormones. They're the fun little puzzle that's, as Jen said, as we get older, it becomes even more exciting because you start to see some of the stuff happening with you. So yeah, excited to go through stuff.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump in. When I came to Dr. Krause, this was December of last year, when we finally kind of pulled everything together. I let you guys know what my symptoms were. Dr. Krause, at that point, based on the symptoms I gave you, what were the tests that you determined we needed to run and why?
Okay, so first and foremost, yes, I was all aboard on the Dutch, because the Dutch test, for those of you guys that maybe aren't familiar with it, it is a dried urine test. So we're looking at how you metabolize hormones. It's not going to give us like something to use to manage hormones. It's going to give us how do you break them down, because so many women have little intricacies that are happening in their liver, in their gut, areas of that nature. And I'll get into it a little bit later, but it really gives us the idea of like, where's the hang up? What's happening, especially with the mood symptoms that Jen was having, because in my mind, I'm going, okay, are we backing up estrogen in the liver, causing her to just not feel great? And of course, pressing on, I call them the little buttons of basically our nervous system to trigger us to not feel so good and have some PMS and have some like just ragers. And so was that happening? I also wanted to see her metabolic function as a whole. So I looked at, what's going on with blood sugar, what's going on with the thyroid, what's going on with iron, the whole 9 yards. So chem panel, which is looking at how your kidney and liver are functioning. Are there any liver enzymes that are up? Then I'm looking at also, is there anything that she has going on where she's hanging on to too much carbohydrates in the system, something called insulin resistance? Because when the weight just shoots up like that, we've got to be like, all right, where's the hang up in the system? So we did that to kind of see like the overall picture. Blood lab side of it, these are things that your doc could potentially order for you. Now, granted, and probably something Jen and I'll have to do after this, and I'm happy to do it. Jen, I already have a handout of how to read labs, but also what to order. I think we should probably give everybody that, because your docs are going to do what they were trained to do. And there are some expanded things that can be covered by your insurance. And so with Jen, what I did was we looked at red blood cells, we looked at white blood cells, we looked at kidney liver function, as I mentioned, blood sugar, a very expanded thyroid, not just TSH, not just free T4. I wanted to know brain to thyroid signaling, all that stuff. So I probably am somewhat more of a geek than the average individual. And so I dive deep. I also looked at vitamin D. That's something that any woman who has hormone issues does want run, because if you don't run vitamin D and you try to manipulate every other thing, and then you find out someone has low vitamin D, you're pretty much like, and I've done it. So I learned from my mistakes big time. And I also looked at her cholesterol because I wanted to see what was going on, because some women, we're trying to lose weight, we're cutting calories, we're cutting fats, and we end up really tanking our amount of cholesterol, and we use cholesterol to make hormones. So if we've cut that down, now we've got that issue. Now there's the other side of things where there's too much cholesterol, and that's a whole nother situation, and we can talk about that later. But that's kind of the basis. There's probably some little detailed labs in there that we can go through if I find them along the way while we're talking, but that's kind of the rundown.
House goes through it with the Dutch test. So like the blood test is what normally your doctors are going to order. And it is kind of a like, here's where you are right now, but your hormones are constantly fluctuating. And it's not that those tests aren't valid, because they are when you're looking at them as a whole, not just like one value, right? They kind of give you an idea of what's going on with the body as a whole, but you'll see, and you'll even see with my report, like, here's what my lab was on a blood, but here's what's actually happening, kind of, I say, behind the scenes, and how your body is or isn't metabolizing it. And it does matter. So with that, do you want to start with blood test first, Dr. Krause? Where would you like to start?
Let's start with blood tests, because it's the most common thing that people have seen. And we can kind of run it through. If it looks familiar to anyone, that's probably best. And then the Dutch will be a whole different story, since most people haven't seen one. So those ones are a little bit more geeking out, and we'll have to do some check-ins to make sure everyone's still engaged and not feeling like things are going over their head.
And I switched it to where you should be able to share your screen. So
Okay, let me then pull up. So give me 1 second, just gonna pull these. I should have had them ahead of time. Here we go. Another question while we're getting me pulling things up. If folks have questions, Jen, do you want folks to wait to the end? Do you want them to raise a hand? How do you want to go about it? Because I definitely am happy to answer questions as I go. If it's a time to stop and do it, I'm happy to do it.
I'll keep an eye on the chat box. So if you guys want to drop questions in, I know like I want you to be able to get through all of the labs. And I know that the questions kind of open up a can of worms, but I know that people
Sure.
do have a lot of questions. So I'll keep an eye on the chat box, and as it's appropriate, maybe kind of jump in and throw some stuff at you. And then if not, we'll try and go back at the end and kind of catch them.
Great. Sounds good. Can everyone see my screen here? We're good?
Yeah, I think we can see it.
Okay. Okay, cool. So this here is a regular kind of blood lab. And in Jen's case, we decided to use my cash pay labs just because sometimes insurance, depending on what plan you have, sometimes, to be honest with you, and this is like a little like insider knowledge, if you have a high deductible plan, you want to do a cash lab like this, because then you don't have to get a surprise from your insurance company that they didn't cover all of your labs. So these ones run a little over $150. It's a lot less than what you may be looking at based on deductible and things of that nature. So just a little insider tip there. So this lab in particular gives us all the abnormals up front. I am going to come back to those because it doesn't really make sense to pull them out of context. So I'm going to run through as is here. So as you've probably seen in any given lab, white blood cells, red blood cells, and a lot of docs will skim right through this, but I want to see, because if the white blood cells are on the high end of normal or on the low end of normal, we could have some clues as to something going on where the system is either compromised or inflamed. So high white blood cells, even on the high end of normal, like 9, 10, and then towards 11, I'm going, something's going on inflammatory wise. Of course, I got to figure that out, because some of us, as we get older, will have long-term chronic infections like cold sores, herpes, mono, even that'll creep up and mess with our hormones as we get older. So I want to see that. Now, the other side is I want to see if your white blood cells are low. So if you're down by the 3.94 range, I want to see like what's going on with your diet, but I also want to know your vitamin D levels, because that means your immune system is on the lower end of functioning. Lower white blood cells could lead towards having issues with lower hormone status. So those are biggies for me. The next one here is red blood cells. If any woman comes into me and says they're tired, I want to know what's going on with their iron, because one of the things that happens to us as we get over 35, 40-ish, we stop producing stomach acid at the rates we did when we were younger. So if we're not making enough stomach acid, we can't digest food effectively and get the red blood cells in. What happens with red blood cells? They carry oxygen for us. So if we don't have a lot of them that are coming in, if iron's not coming in like it should, because iron helps with binding the oxygen as well, we're going to feel pretty darn tired and not so great. The other side of this is if you're starting to have what I call rager periods, where you're bleeding like, you know, you were 14 and you're worried about leaving the house when you got the period going, or you're having fibroids, things of that nature, where you're getting big clots. If the red blood cells are low and your hemoglobin, which also goes along with it, and hematocrit, these guys, if they're all low, I'm going, okay, we've got to hurry up and get you stopping that bleeding train. And there are some herbs that can do it. There are different things that we can do to work with that. But it also means we've got to help support your iron, because that's another reason you may be fatigued. Now, a lot of conventional docs will be on top of that, but I'm surprised, unfortunately, you know, with the system the way it is and not having enough time to sit with patients, sometimes this gets overlooked. So, and even if your numbers are on the low end of normal, this is a big thing. Your periods are heavy, numbers are low and normal. We want to be talking about iron-rich foods like spinach and beets and things of that nature. So something to keep in mind. The rest of this is all markers that have to do with the size of your cells. You could have small red blood cells, you could have big red blood cells. And so in that case, if the red blood cells are small or big, then that's a completely different type of anemia. And B12 and folate might be helpful in certain cases. So things to think about. I also do test B12 and folate, by the way, because they are common deficiencies in women too. So with chemistry, this is your kidney and liver function. And one of the biggies right off the bat is blood sugar. With Jen at 83, she's doing great. I like folks to be between 80 and 90. A lot of docs won't say anything to you till you go over 100. If you are not between that 80 or 90 range on average, then, and you're creeping up towards the 90 plus on average with your blood sugar, you are having trouble burning carbohydrates. You are likely stuck in carb burn a lot more than you are burn, and maybe why you've got some fat, hanging around. And that's a big. Magnesium often helps that. Jen was already taking magnesium, so I didn't have to work on that one with her, but it's something to think about. Now, if you're lower in the glucose, like say 75 or something like that, not the end of the world. If you start getting into the 60s, then I've got to be like, do we have a roller coaster going on? So anybody that's having that, we also want to look at 2 other labs, hemoglobin A1C and something called insulin resistance factors or fasting insulin. I'll show you that in a second. So
Hey, Dr. Krause, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is very, very confusing, and this is actually, yes, I would love like an updated list of what you recommend people ask for with labs. I have one, but I want to make sure that we're putting them together and that I have a complete list as well. One of the things that I think is really confusing is that, yes, people do come back from their doctor and their doctors say your labs are normal. There is a difference between a normal conventional range versus an optimal functional range. And the reason that I bring this up is when you mentioned glucose, I get this all the time. And in fact, I just had a new client that you'll be seeing too. She came back with her glucose and it was over 100, and her and like literally the range on there, I think it went up to like 105.
Yeah.
And I was, and she was like right at that mark. And I'm like, nope. So can you explain the difference just real quick between those two things?
Yeah. So these labs, so this one is an independent lab, but they're like Quest and LabCorp. All of these labs have a 20% margin of the bell curve on either end of what is normal. And so you get wide ranges of things. And a lot of conventional docs are not taught about how the labs work in terms of optimized range, but also what's not being talked about is what's shown in research. And my ranges are coming from optimized bodies, right? People who have done the homework to take care of themselves and then had someone look at their labs over and over again. So functional docs, we're more nitpicky because we're trying to figure out what is going on within the body. And so basically the difference is that we are running off of tighter parameters in terms of these lab values. That's really what it boils down to. And it's how we've been trained. I call myself now a functional naturopathic doctor because functional medicine doctors can be medical doctors as well. So just want to clarify that too in that range. Does that help?
Thanks, Dr. Krause. I think it does because again, I think people get real confused when their doctor just goes, oh, you're fine. And they know that they're not fine. So
absolutely. And like I said, with these ranges, stuff can still be within the normal range, but I'm looking at the patterns. I'm looking at your symptoms. We're putting things together. Sometimes I will have labs that show completely normal on someone, even in my parameters, but we can tease out based on little things that are a little bit higher, a little bit lower in the range that tell us, oh, wait, no, that is off. So that is why your doc may say one thing or the other. And it does get confusing because it sounds like we're kind of arguing with each other, and basically it boils down to education and more time spent with labs. That's what functional medicine docs do. We spend more time on those. So looking at another really big important thing that a lot of folks get kind of passed over on is the sodium, potassium, and chloride. These are our electrolytes. Most women have trouble with what's going on in their cells. And what I'm saying by that is we have a lot of puffiness and swelling. Fluid will build up outside the cells, but inside the cells, we're having trouble with keeping what we want there. So we'll often see a reflection of what's going on in the cells by looking in the blood just to get a snapshot of If these numbers are low in the blood, you better believe they're going to be low in your cells. So Jen's were good. She had been getting some IV therapy. So I expected these to be better. A lot of women will run low on the sodium and chloride. And then some women will run low on potassium, and potassium can cause leg cramps, restless legs, muscle spasms. So this is something to really think about. And yes, bananas can help, pistachios can help too, but sometimes we need a little bit oomph. They're not a supplement per se. I use things called cell salts, and we can talk about that a little bit later. Now, CO2, the carbon dioxide. This tells me that Jen is breathing okay in terms of her blood gas and her pH in the blood. If I see this number really low or really, really high, so we're talking like 31 plus, I know that someone is either not breathing, like hyperventilating, or holding their breath for too long. So this is something very interesting that I add in based on the nervous system. So if someone's having hot flashes, someone can't sleep, and the carbon dioxide levels are off on one under the other, I'm looking at, okay, I've got to do something there in terms of helping with breath work. So that's a little clue for me. Calcium can be tied to elevated blood sugar. You can tell that she's fine at the 9 there. The proteins, these guys have an interesting tie into metabolism. And you'll see where she's got a low level here of globulin. Globulin is tied into your ability to make your immune complexes. So like if you have an antibody to something, your globulin will be involved in making that. So immunoglobulins. Now, in her case, this means she's got a little bit of an immune compromise there. I'm not going to put a ton of weight on it because I don't see the rest of these guys off. They're all kind of a little bit in the higher range. So I'm going, she's okay. Sometimes we will see a fluctuation there. So we also have to kind of use a little bit of experience and what we've been doing. I've been looking at these for about 17 years now. So you kind of get a flow over time. And so that's why it is good to have someone help you to differentiate things. Now, the other biggie here, bilirubin, this is how we recycle red blood cells. If by any chance this number is really low, I'm going to be thinking the liver is a little bit bogged down because we're not recycling the red blood cells like we should. So that goes back to liver toxicity. Same thing goes for this liver enzyme alkaline phosphatase. If it's super low, like in the 30s, I'm going, okay, someone's not absorbing nutrients. If it's high, over 100, or if it's triple or quadruple, I'm thinking something's really wrong with the liver or bones. And this is something to keep in mind, because you might be thinking right now, like, what does my liver have anything to do with my hormones? This is where we make the foundation. This is where your cholesterol is actually put together and putting together your molecules to make your hormones. So you want your liver to be super healthy. Now, AST, ALT, these guys here are the liver enzymes. Jen was also doing good. In fact, she's a little bit, I would say even low normal on that ALT. So she has an extra clean liver. Let's put it that way. If these numbers are higher, then I'm thinking we've got either possibly some fatty liver or someone who is drinking too much, being exposed to certain toxins, things of that nature. One of the things that I find as I get older is that, you know, this age group, we have a tendency towards our cocktails and sometimes wine. And I will see women having trouble with hormones and these numbers be high. We can reverse that. It's not the end of the world. Okay, let's get to the next. Any questions so far? How are we doing? Jen, you're muted.
I forgot the mute. So far, no questions.
Okay.
If you guys have questions as we go through, just go ahead and drop them in the box. I'll keep an eye on it.
All right. I hope I'm not boring anybody. I'm hella geek when it comes to this stuff. So I hope I'm keeping you guys interested. Please ask questions. I'm happy to answer. So other biggie is kidney function. You can see Jen's filtration here. See how it says stage 1, 90 mils or more, and she's at 81. Most folks who are 40 plus will have a little bit of compromise to kidneys because we've just lived on earth longer. I don't freak out too bad when we're in that stage where we've got a little bit of mild damage, but I do want the kidney filtration to be over 80. on average. So if that dipped down a little bit more, and Jen, we would do some intervention there. I also look at it in terms of swelling. If you're having any trouble with puffiness, swelling, water retention, blood pressure stuff, we do want to look at kidney function and how to improve it. Sometimes all it is the help of lymphatic herbs. So moving your lymph system a little bit more. Sometimes it's things like ginkgo to help with circulation. Now, Jen has low ferritin. Ferritin is iron storage. So remember how I was looking at the red blood cells and all of that stuff? She's got a low normal there in terms of the ferritin. I like it in a perfect world, 50 or above. Many women will struggle with a lower ferritin. And what we did in Jen's case is we tried to optimize her diet a little bit more in terms of not what she was eating, but what she was absorbing. And we used some digestive enzymes. And I will often use stomach-based digestive enzymes, which you might be thinking like, what the heck is that? That's hydrochloric acid with a little pepsin. And this helps to really break down the foods better so that you're absorbing the nutrients. So many women have deficiencies with iron, and they've had infusions, they've done all kinds of different things, taken a million supplements that constipate them and nothing works. It may be stomach acid low, because as I mentioned, we do have this happen over time. So something to think about. Now you'll see in Jen's coronary risk, which is her cholesterol there, her triglycerides are at 47. That is an excellent number. We will give her a high five for that. We want that number to be 75 or below. If it's over 75, then we've got some blood sugar stuff going on, because triglycerides are your carbs turning to fat. So in this case, she was great. We didn't have to work on that. But for a lot of women, this is a struggle. And I'm looking at glucose, triglycerides, and I'll show you a couple other things, the insulin resistance and whatnot. And the reason I'm looking at it is because she had gained weight so fast, and we're like, what happened? So one of the pictures that we need to look at. Her total cholesterol is great. Go ahead. Yeah.
Myra, I'm sure I'm not saying that right, had a quick question. She wanted to know, and I think this is specific to the coronary risk factor. She said she's been having a lot of hair shedding. Would this tie into it? It's not the first thing I would think of. Is this something that could affect it?
It could. I would be thinking more on the lines of iron storage within the liver. So if you have any stuff going on with liver enzymes being elevated, then I would think of it to the hair, possibly because of not being able to store effective amounts of iron. And what'll happen is if we can't store effective amounts of iron in the liver, we do use it to get oxygen to the tissues. The hair is going to be the last place the body thinks about putting the oxygen, because it's like hair is secondary. So I would be thinking about that. I would also be thinking with anyone that has hair loss, obviously thyroid, obviously digestion. Are you getting your nutrients in? And then the other biggie is high testosterone levels. Because in some cases of what a lot of docs term polycystic ovarian syndrome, you might not have any cysts on your ovaries whatsoever, but you might have high testosterone, and that can cause the hair to dump too. Now, cortisol is another factor. We'll talk about that when we get into the Dutch test, but it is a thing too that causes issues. So great question though, because hair loss is one of the most, let's be honest. I mean, we want to look good. We want our hair to be nice and thick. Like we want this, and it can be so frustrating. And really those are the areas that I just rattled off are the things you want to be looking at. And I'll repeat them because I know it's a thing for a lot of women. Do you have enough stomach acid? That's like step one. And you can test that with something called the HCl challenge. Jen and I'll include that for you guys. The next thing is, do you have enough iron in the system? The other one, is there too much testosterone? The last one is your liver bogged down in terms of fatty liver, and you're not getting the nutrients that you need? That can be a completely other thing going on there. So great question. Now, the LDL cholesterol, the HDL cholesterol, do those have anything to do with hormones, health? LDL, I do want to mention that one. HDL is considered the good cholesterol. The higher you have it, great. I'm happy. We do want bigger molecules of it. You could do a test, which we did do on Jen, to see how big her HDLs were. LDL, though, the one that's considered the clogger, that one can jump up in women who have low estrogen levels and are currently repairing something, meaning their body is in repair mode. I don't always think of LDL as being a bad thing. If I'm looking at other labs and a person in front of me looks completely healthy otherwise, but then we just have some elevated LDLs and their diet's great, I'm going, what is the body repairing? Is it trying to fix the thyroid? Is it trying to fix the adrenals, which are two glands that are very, let's put it this way, very sensitive to hormone shifts. Let's see what else we got. CRP. Let's go down to that for a second, and then we'll pop to the next thing. The ratios, just self-explanatory in terms of risk. C-reactive protein cardio. I run that on every woman because the number one killer of women is cardiovascular disease. And we want to know if we have inflamed arteries. And this is Jen's 0.3 is great. Anything even creep into above 1, I'm like, what is going on in the arteries, especially if someone's got higher blood pressure, higher heart rate. We do want to be working on that. So that's something to consider as well. There are plenty of herbs we can work with there. Now, I did a little bit of what's called a fractionation study. I looked at Jen's particles. Does this have much to do with hormones? Let's put it this way. It has a lot more to do with inflammation in the body as a whole. And what we found in terms of her HDLs is that she has small little HDLs. So when I said having a higher HDL number is good, absolutely. What you do want to know is, do you have little tiny particles or big dump trucks? She's got little shovels. What they do is they shovel out cholesterol. If you have dump trucks, they're like really moving them. So what this means for anyone in this case is that you may need to really consider estrogens as helping you with your cardiovascular system a little bit more, or you could use herbal forms too. If you've got less quality HDLs and you've got a higher LDL going on. Granted, Jen does not, but I know a lot of women do, and it's somewhat family history. So something to think about here. Now, the same thing goes with the LDLs, those guys that clog the arteries and show up when we're healing the body. The more little guys you have, the more they get across and clog the artery. The bigger ones you have, they don't do that as much. So you kind of want to know what your sizes are to give you an overall like picture of choosing what kind of diet to look at for you, optimizing that. Do you, looking at fat digestion, things of that nature are also part of the picture here. And the bottom here, this LPIR score, that is her insulin resistance score. And you can see below 25. So we can fairly say at this point that it's not an insulin resistance weight gain issue with Jen. And so we're going to move to the next thing on that and kind of move from there. And you can also see that she has smaller size LDLs. So we do want to watch her cardiovascular system, even though her total profile for her cholesterol looks great. We want to be thinking about making sure she breaks down fats well, making sure that she gets in good omegas, things of that nature. All right. How are we doing?
I remember to unmute this time. So far, I think we're going okay. Okay.
All right. We're almost there, guys. We're almost there. You can see there's a lot to it that gives me all the kind of clues as to what's going on, but more information, the better. You don't want to leave certain stones unturned, especially if you're dealing, with hormones and you want your second half, I call it like your second half, your better half of your life. You want to live it well. Don't skimp on your laps. So TSH is brain to thyroid signaling. Whoops, went a little low there. Thyroid's up here. And then T4 is coming out of the thyroid. We also convert to T3 in the thyroid, in the liver, in the gut, and in your cells. So one of the biggest things that I see overlooked in the women's hormone industry is something called cellular hypothyroidism. A doc may just look at this TSH and maybe you'll get a T4 and they'll be like, you're fine. Okay, T3 is your most effective thyroid hormone. If we have no idea what's happening there, we've missed the boat because you have cells, you have these cells here. I once went head to head with the endocrinologist because she was trying to tell me that there's no point in testing T3. And in the end, I was like, well, do your patients have cells? She's like, yeah. I'm like, well, we convert on the cells, don't we? Yeah. She's like, maybe I better test that. So anyway, it's one of those things where it's just not taught in conventional medicine to think it through. And one of my other things I will mention, just to kind of give you guys a little background on me too, I taught anatomy and physiology for 5 years. And so I also dove into how this stuff works quite a bit just so I could teach it. So anyway, that's just another side note there. But with T3, which wasn't done on this particular test because I didn't suspect that Jen had anything necessarily going on with her thyroid, you could do another test called a reverse T3 to see if your body's making T3 that's not effective. You could also do something called T3 uptake, and that's to see if your cells are pulling in the T3 effectively. And in her case, like, her numbers are all great here, and I have no reason to think that there's anything major going on there. All right, FSH, LH. I'm going to drop these this way so you guys can see them. So FSH and LH are brain to your ovary signaling. These guys are often done when we're looking at fertility, but also looking to see if someone is close to menopause. And that was kind of our question that Jen and I had. We're like, well, what's going on? And especially if you haven't had a period for a while, you haven't quite gone that year, but you've gone like 6 months, I will run this just to, get an idea. And FSH is typically going to be high if someone is fully into menopause. You can see postmenopausal, you've got 23 to 116. More often than not, it's going to be somewhere in the 40s when someone is officially in menopause. You can see that there's a mid-cycle peak. That's an ovulation spike. And I will look at that if someone's trying to get pregnant. But for the most part, I'm looking to see if we're over 40 on this one. And Jen is not, so she is not quite there yet. And LH, darn, LH is another one there, typically used for fertility, but it's in this, they go together on labs. And so I can't order one without the other in this particular profile. So that's why that one's there. All right. Now, progesterone. Now we're getting the good stuff. Here's the actual blood hormones. So what is the difference between blood hormones and the Dutch test? Blood hormones are what are in your blood this moment when she had the blood drawn, real time. I also will test saliva hormones when I have someone who's on like birth control, someone who is also wanting to do a topical based bioidentical, or someone who hasn't had a period for a very long time. And we already know that their blood levels are going to be low, but we want to know how much they're holding on to in their tissues. So in this case, we looked at what was real time, and estradiol. Check this out. So estradiol is your most useful estrogen. And I usually check these hormone levels the second part of the cycle. So from about day 19 to 26, at least like where I can guarantee they're after ovulation. And if someone's not getting a period, we kind of go off of your last one you had, or we just go with it and see. This is why the Dutch backs this test up. So progesterone was low, and you can see the difference, 0.67 compared to 377.5. That's a big, big difference. And when we ran Jen's, we were trying to figure out, what was going on with her overall levels of hormones just in general. 377.5 is high for the second half of the cycle. And many women heading into perimenopause and beyond will have these like ups and downs and ups and downs. And a lot of conventional docs will be like, I'm not going to use bioidentical hormones in someone that still has their period and has these ups and downs. I used to think that way until I realized in myself that I could use them strategically in different times of the months at different smaller levels and get a blunting. So I don't have this ups and down. I don't have the like heavy periods where I'm afraid to leave the house. I'm wearing like 8 tampons, and I'm kidding, I don't do that. But you've got tampons like every 5 minutes. You've got 8 pads is what I was trying to say there. And you're like, I just need a diaper. That you can use the estradiol to your benefit. Now the kicker here is if I just use blood, I have no idea how Jen's breaking down her estrogen. So if I throw estrogen at her and she doesn't metabolize it well, she might not feel so good. And she might also have some heavier periods. She might have some wonkier like mood swings, you name it. I've seen a lot of things happen from women who didn't have Dutch tests to know how they metabolize hormones. And so a lot of women will have tried bioidentical hormones and been like, these things don't work, they're awful. And the same goes with progesterone. And this is a fun one where we could talk about you, Jen, a little bit in terms of having some trouble with progesterone. Now, you guys saw her labs. Her liver was fine. Her cholesterol wasn't backed up. Her ferritin's a little low, but otherwise there was no indication that she would have had trouble breaking down progesterone, but she did. And a lot of women actually do have trouble with it. And I'm convinced on a couple different layers that, yes, it's somewhat liver and stress, but I think it's also what the bioidentical form, which should be tolerated well, sometimes gets a little gunked up in the delivery of what we use with it. And so in Jen's case, we're using troches, which are like little, for lack of a better term, they're like little starburst things that have the progesterone in them. They don't taste like Starburst. Jen can attest to that. They taste awful.
It was a bad choice on my part. What's interesting about this, so, and this is a good tie-in too, because I wanted to make sure that people understand this, that when you do start to move into the choice of doing bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, it is not a magic pill. It is a process. And I literally, like, I had a very strong reaction to progesterone, like literally woke up with migraines and I'm like, what the heck? And I'm not a migraine person. Like, I don't have headaches. And I thought, oh, well, let's just try to get through it. And I made it through about 3 days where I'm like, okay. And then I just started like taking my troches and like cutting them in half and trying to find a dose I could do. And eventually we just had to go with a different option, but it does take a little bit of trial and error to figure out what you can actually metabolize. And what's interesting too, and I think Dr. Krause, you'll see this, when we did my Dutch test, it was, I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 weeks after this. And when you look at my estradiol, if I remember correctly, it had bottomed out.
Yep.
So we could actually see that, like, that wave of what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the fun part of these too. I wish in a perfect world, we could do like an everyday, well, there is an everyday Dutch test. You could do a Dutch test every single day to see what your hormones do. It's kind of fascinating, but it's a little work and I couldn't imagine doing it myself, but it is fascinating. And with progesterone, another thing, I often will give herbs first if someone's up for that. Or if you've already tried it, then that was kind of, I believe that's where you were at, Jen. Didn't you try it? I think you were already doing something. I can't remember now on that one, but sometimes folks will have tried like evening primrose oil or will have tried the Vitex, which is known as chasteberry. And either one of those, if you didn't get results, and I better explain too what progesterone does. Progesterone is our calm sister. She's chill. She helps us if we're feeling aggro, or feeling angry, or feeling agitated. She chills us out. So if we're not able to tolerate it or we're not getting those responses with the herbs, then yes, it is time to kind of see if a bioidentical works. Delivery method can be a thing. So troches, like I was mentioning, is something she holds in her mouth and sucks on. There's drops under the tongue. There's drops you can put on the skin. There's creams you can put on the skin too. And sometimes timing of day. Some people do amazing if they put them on at night and go to sleep and they feel sleepy and they sleep well, because progesterone can help with that. Or they'll get amped up and we got to use them in the morning. So it's kind of a range. So there's those guys. DHEA there, that is our precursor brain to the adrenal glands. And it's a stimulator for the hormone production. It also goes to your ovaries, and Jen's is fine. It's not out of control. If it was super high, I would say, okay, she's super stressed. If it was low, then I would be like, okay, her adrenal glands, are they fatigued? Are they having some trouble producing adrenal, like all of the things adrenals do, which is blood sugar, hormones, neurochemicals, so serotonin, dopamine. They also are in charge of fluid balance in the body, and nothing was going on there. So I'm like, okay, great. And then we did double check it with the Dutch, and so we'll get to that in a second. Now here's her blood testosterone. 23 is an okay number, not too high, not too low, kind of where I expect most women to be who are more fit. If it was too high, then I would be worried about a little bit more on blood sugar imbalance, but we already know she's good there. And then sex hormone binding globulin and free testosterone. And I'm going to jump back to free testosterone since I just talked about total. She was on the lower end there, and that's in the blood. The free testosterone, you want the total and the free levels. You don't want to just have a total testosterone. That doesn't give you the whole picture, because 9 times out of 10, if someone is really deficient in testosterone, we're going to see it in the free. And free means it's bioavailable. It's not bound to anything, like this guy here, the sex hormone binding globulin, because the more stress we get, the higher this number can go up. And I always watch that number compared to what's going on in real time. So with Jen, you can see 0.2, that is low. A perfect place for testosterone in my world is between kind of 2 and 3. And you can see that's a little out of their range. So now you can see where I've found optimal things in that department. And then IGF-1 is really the blood sugar balancer as a whole. And what that means is growth factor. This tells us how much growth factor she is making. It's a marker for that. And growth factor has a lot to do with blood sugar, but it also has a lot to do with sleep and ability to keep on lean muscle. And she was good in that department. This is something, if I find a woman all of a sudden just losing muscle mass, this is where I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Let me see that IGF, because there are ways to stimulate growth hormone without using synthetic growth hormone. That can be really dangerous. I've seen some bad things happen there. I just will give you that because there are a lot of docs in Mexico that are like handing it out like candy, and it's super expensive. You can use peptides, something called ipamorelin. You can use things of that nature, or you could even use deer antler velvet. Sounds super weird, but the deer don't use the velvet. They actually rub it off naturally. So it's a natural byproduct, but it has a lot of growth hormone in it. And folks are using that, and they've been using that in Asian medicine for thousands of years, and it works well too. So I'm going to stop this and switch to the other and let you guys ask questions if there are any.
Out, because if you guys are paying attention, like, and she went through, if you remember at the very top of that lab, there were only a few markers that were like off, and they weren't off that much. So a couple things. Number one, if I had just gone to regular conventional doctor with all of my symptoms, and you guys, I cannot stress to you how bad I felt. Like, was not myself at all. I was desperate. I think I even was like, hey, like, we got to get this, like, we got to fix this now. I would have just gotten all your labs are pretty normal. You're fine, right? The other thing to keep in mind too is that because our hormones fluctuate, when we're looking at those sex hormones, your estrogen, your progesterone, DHA, testosterone, like especially your progesterone, your estrogen, a lot of docs won't even test those if they know you're in perimenopause, because they know that they fluctuate like crazy. But, and you'll see when she pulls it up, if you know how to read the reports and you know how to pull it all together and what those hormones are telling you, you can start to put together the picture of like, okay, well, this is what it looks like is happening. And with the Dutch, you can actually see how I'm metabolizing it, and you can see that curve. So this is why I'm so passionate about the Dutch, and why I'm so passionate about working with naturopaths and functional medicine docs, because now you can actually see the whole picture versus just getting this like, your labs are fine, it's just part of aging. Hopefully that's
yes. I hope so too. I hope so too. Here's the exciting part, guys. We're going to get into the fun stuff, because you've probably all seen the other labs before. So hopefully this one's exciting. All right, here's the Dutch. So these dials here kind of tell us where the hormone levels are at, and it gives us a really good idea of where she's at, 2 weeks later, and what's going on in terms of these levels. Her progesterone was still low. And so that's why we did choose to go with a bioidentical on that one. And her estradiol, you can even see like, she would have been like way up here if it would have been the 2 weeks prior. And now she's down here. Testosterone still low. This star to star is kind of what's considered the normal range. And like I said, I will still nitpick in here, even within a functional medicine test, I still will nitpick in there. Now you'll also see, here's her cortisol, and she has a pretty good pattern. And for a lot of women, if there's insomnia going on, a lot of times what we'll have is this nighttime will be high and this morning time will be low. What I'm suspecting was going on with Jen is that this nighttime, you could see it's kind of sort of towards the higher end of norm. I bet right after this time frame, she shot up, and then her peak cortisol was probably somewhere between 3 and 5 a.m., which is common for so many women to wake up right about that time. And this test kind of shows me that that's most likely what was going on. And so by the time she was trying to wake up in the morning, she was like, not able to get through that. And so then she kind of got herself a little bit up here, which is a normal kind of pattern. And then the rest of the day kind of carried on, but likely mornings would have been pretty rough. So morning times, Jen, How are things these days? How are we doing? Are we getting better?
Can you hear me? I am on off mute. Things are, I will tell you the two biggest things that I've noticed since doing this is that I am sleeping like a normal person again, aside from the 5:30 a.m. wake up call from my cat. Other than that, I'm doing much better with the sleeping. And energy levels are just more like even throughout the day because I was getting huge crashes. I just felt horrible all day. Now it's like, no, I'm like a lot more even throughout the day for sure.
Good. And here's the thing, guys. Jen and I really just got her started in January officially. And I think that was more like, when is this? Yeah. So December, January, February, March, April, May. Usually it takes a good 6 months to get the sweet spot going with the hormones. So she's 4 months in, got some progress. This is good. A lot of docs will kind of lead you to think, and some of these not fertility, longevity, like clinics, let's put it that way. I don't want you to think, if you're in Washington, longevity clinic, don't tie it to what I'm saying right now, but clinics like that will tend to just jump you on something and be like, yeah, you're gonna feel amazing in like 2 days. Such a lie. You have to do some work. Now, remember Jen's DHEA was in a normal range. She's still in a decent normal range here. So that's consistent throughout, because I will look to see if there's anything different there. The other biggie here, look how her cortisol's here, but her metabolized cortisol's down low. So what does that mean? It means that she was spiking her cortisol and then hanging on to it in the bloodstream. That itself can keep your nervous system thinking that the bear's chasing you, because there's still cortisol just floating through the system. Because keep in mind, this is bloodstream. This is what's supposed to be coming out in the urine. These are like, yes, these are 2 urine markers, but this is tied to what's in the bloodstream. This is tied to what she's converted as a waste product. So that means that her nervous system thought like she was just like being pursued by something all the time. And that will definitely wear on your adrenals. And that's where that concept of adrenal fatigue, if you had true adrenal fatigue, you would be dead. It's more like an adrenal imbalance. I do have to be honest. I've just lived in the world of adrenal stuff for so long that I'm so used to saying fatigue, but I don't want you guys to confuse that. So that's that side. These are all the numbers that are going along with this next page. So here's the next page. This one is where the magic happens, because this tells us your whole hormone process of how you break down everything from the brain all the way down to getting things through the cells and out of the body. Pregnenolone is your precursor hormone coming from the brain. It's like the mothership for messaging. And you can see going here, pregnenolone goes to progesterone, then we have DHEA over this way. One of the other things that I will mention, if someone doesn't tolerate progesterone very well, is what can happen is if we're putting in progesterone, that sends a message to pregnenolone to drive down the DHEA pathway a little bit more. Now, what that does is give us a little bit more androgen, so it can make us agitated and not feel so good. And so this is the other way that I've seen things go off the rails, just so I can give you a little pattern for that. Now, you'll see we go down to these steroid hormones, we go straight to testosterone. How many of you ladies knew that we made testosterone before we made estrogen in our bodies? Jen did. I didn't until I went to school. I was like impressed, like, wow, okay, we make testosterone first, then we convert to estrogens. And so if I give a woman testosterone replacement therapy, I do have to think about the fact that it could back convert to estrogens. And there's 2 in particular that it back converts to. Estrone, this is our inflammatory sister, because we have 3 estrogens. I don't know how many people knew we had 3 estrogens too. We have 3 of them. Estrone's our inflammatory sister. Estradiol is our useful one. 400 plus functions in the body. That's what we want. Estriol, she is all about keeping your vaginal area healthy, preventing the UTIs, keeping like BV and different infections at bay, keeping things for like the pH being good down there. That's what she does. You want some of her. Now, all 3 of these ladies do go through 3 different pathways through your liver, which is this guy here, the CYP1A1. This one goes through the liver, but it starts in the gut. This one is the one related to breast cancer. It's the one related to that cray-crayness we get around PMS time. Because we get agitation through something called quinone, and then we end up having trouble detoxing it if we don't have enough glutathione. This same pathway can also cause you to have DNA damage. This is breast cancer, this is uterine cancer, things of that nature. And this is why I find this test absolutely, I think every woman should have it to know if you're not metabolizing hormones well, are you setting yourself up for breast cancer? I will run this on every woman that I am going to do bioidentical hormones with, because I want my assurance that there is nothing that could possibly go wrong, because the connection to synthetic hormones and causing cancer was because of these detox pathways. Can you take bioidentical hormones and get breast cancer? It's very minimal, but I will say, if you want your assurance, you want to know how you detox. Absolutely want to know how you detox. Same thing with testosterone, because testosterone can back convert to estrogen. You're not out of the woods if you're just taking testosterone. So I want women to really know this. This is important information to have. And we can help you with this pathway. This is through the gut. We can work on your microbiome, because so many women have imbalances in their gut microbiome that will cause them to reabsorb estrogens unnecessarily. And when I talk about reabsorption, we're reabsorbing estrone, not the useful estradiol. I wish it was that case. And that process is one of the ways we end up having breast cancer, but also it's how we get breast tenderness. It's also how we can get kind of cramps and just not feeling so great. It's also one of the other impacts of how we get a little bit of looser stools or constipation around the period too. So your microbiome is huge. Taking care of that, knowing that information and being able to take care of it is crucial. And that's where calcium D-glucarate, that's a supplement that can help there, but calcium D-glucarate can't do it all on its own. You need some beneficial bacteria. This other pathway here, the CYP3A4, that goes through your liver. So this is why I was looking at cholesterol and making sure your liver is healthy. This guy here, the CYP1A1, we want that one to drive most of the time. You've probably heard of like broccoli sprouts, like a quarter cup a day broccoli sprouts will keep cancer, in particular breast cancer away. That's why it's optimizing this pathway. So something to think about. Also, diindolylmethane DIM, maybe you guys have heard of that, or sulforaphane, which is broccoli sprouts. That all goes down that pathway. So as you can see, a lot of stuff going on here. Then this is through cells. And Jen's good with methylation. Maybe some of you guys have heard of methylation defects like MTHFR. That's needing good amounts of B12 and folate. And I will test that in particular to know what is going on. So that is something to keep in mind. This is how we get the hormones out of the cells. Okay, I'm realizing we're on time here with the almost at 11. Well, yeah, 11. So Jen, how are we doing? What do you want to do? How do you want me to go from here?
Keep doing what you do, Doc.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
good.
Do we got any questions? How's everybody faring in there?
So far, I think we're okay. Sam said she didn't know that about the testosterone. I think that it's very eye-opening. And here's what I will say about all this. I know that, especially with the Dutch, you start looking at all these graphs and you're like, what? And I know like a lot of times, just you guys know with my clients, we always work on lifestyle factors first, but there always comes this point where I'm like, okay, no, we need testing now. And they get referred to Dr. Krause and they get their lab work back and they're like, oh, you need to walk me through this. and I'll look at it, but I'm like, she literally will go one by one and she'll break it down and make it super simple and be like, this is the first course of action. So that it really isn't, it isn't overwhelming.
Yeah. And I won't talk as fast. I'm trying to talk a little faster so that we are not keeping you guys here all day. Because usually my reviews with people, I'm about an hour to an hour and a half on a review because I want to make sure that you understand everything that's going down here. I do have a question. Is anybody out there having any chin hair growth, having any cysts on their ovaries, any issues with blood sugar that you know of right now? Because I didn't go down talking about this pathway here and how that ties in. Let's see if anybody has anything.
And I do not. I will tell you, I see this a lot. Well, you know, we've got another one too that just popped up. I'm like, okay. And so can you go through that really quickly? Because it is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah. So it's me in a nutshell too. So for those of you who are experiencing this, I have had chin hair on my chin since I was 16 years old. Gosh, it's crazy. And so the polycystic component for me has been a thing. Blood sugar's been a lifelong issue. And so what's happening is that this particular pathway, I make a lot of DHEA. I'm wired, right? I'm excited about life. So I make a lot of this. And then what happens is our body has to decide which pathway it likes to go down. We prefer this 5-beta pathway. What does that mean? It means that we can detox like naturally a little bit better. If we go towards this other pathway, it means that we like to make extra cortisol. Now, making more cortisol makes our blood sugar go up. It also causes us to back convert a little bit more to testosterone as well, causing us to have higher levels of testosterone. And with that comes lots of hair. And sometimes you're losing hair up top. I don't know. I think I just have like some serious genetics with hair. So I'm not losing hair, but I definitely have to take care of what's going on here. What do I do about it? Now, zinc, inositol. So inositol is an antioxidant, sort of a B vitamin. Those guys can be incredible for helping you to clear and move towards this beta, so 5-beta preference of detox. Because what happens is instead of back conversion to testosterone, we can just drive down this pathway through the cells and eliminate the extra testosterone more effectively. Some folks might have had to take something like spironolactone because they ended up with acne from having high levels of androgens. This is why they're doing it. Spironolactone blocks testosterone production and drives you down this 5-beta pathway. So for any women that are struggling there, I absolutely recommend, and there's different formulas out there. I really recommend trying zinc at 30 milligrams with food. Don't do it without food. Most of us have probably tried zinc because of the pandemic, but definitely do it with food. Sometimes I'll bump people up to 50 milligrams and then inositol, or there are combination formulas that I will use in this case as well. Like, and there's saw palmetto, which is an herb that will also help in this case because it is a big deal. And a lot of women, as we get older, will actually drive towards this pathway. It's kind of how like grandma starts to look like grandpa. Anybody ever notice that? Yeah, we tend towards that because we're dropping on the amount of estrogens, dropping our progesterones, and then the body just automatically goes into that testosterone and extra sugar land. So it's something that we do want to think about. So if anyone is struggling with that, I can give more details on what I would do. There's a little bit of a specific protocol and knowing which direction to go. It's nothing's a one size fits all situation. When we look at these things, you sometimes have to play with things, and some people can't tolerate zinc. And some people can't tolerate inositol. So it's a experiment on that level, but yeah, you definitely do want to think about that.
You were like, yep, got the chin hair. So like I said, I see it a lot with my clients. They're like, what is happening? So we do have a question. The question is, if you're on I don't know how to say it, spiraculone. Is that right?
Spironolactone.
There you go. Is it also okay to take zinc?
Yes. Yes. Yep, you can do that. You could even do inositol. You could do saw palmetto. And then what I'll sometimes do is back people off of the spironolactone eventually and see if we can get you off of it completely. That is something, I mean, that's usually my goal with everybody, get you off the pharmaceuticals. Any other questions? Okay, so you're going to see some more numbers and letters. Those are boring. Let's get at the good stuff. So all those numbers tie into what's on this picture here. So many women struggle with sleep. And I'm often frustrated with the Dutch test on this one because the melatonin will not reflect the true nature of what someone's feeling in terms of sleep unless they are really, really depleted. And Jen was having troubles with sleep at this time. And you could see she was kind of on the lower end of normal there. And I am a huge believer in melatonin, and I also have dabbled with high doses compared to like the 2 or 3 milligrams. And it's an individual case situation. But if I do find that someone's melatonin is below the star, I often will even go towards high dose, meaning like 200 milligrams, because Melatonin can be an antioxidant just as much as it can be a hormone to help you to stay asleep. And this guy is super sensitive to light. So that's kind of why the blue light blocking glasses and all those things are important on that side of things. But you can see in Jen's case, melatonin probably wasn't necessarily her whole problem. I think we were getting more into the cortisol overriding the melatonin in certain cases. And if we were able to do her labs like throughout the night and see what her cortisol levels were, I still have that hunch that she spiked early in here in that 3 a.m. time frame. And that is something to think about, that cortisol can override melatonin, because if you have a bear chasing you, you want to know. And so your body is primed for survival. And for a lot of women with hot flashes, night sweats, and ones that'll happen like before bed and when you wake up, or night sweats that happen at night, cortisol is most commonly the factor. The daytime hot flashes, those are more estrogen connected. Just a little tidbit to think about there. And of course, we also have to think about diet, like sugar fluxes will cause a hot flash, gluten and dairy and other foods can cause hot flashes too. So you can't completely blame it all on estrogen all the time, but just in a general sense, that's kind of what happens. Now you'll notice here that she's got some cortisone in addition to cortisol. What the heck is that? Cortisone is the opposite spectrum of cortisol, and your body wants to be able to keep you de-inflamed to counter the inflammation that cortisol presents. And that's your vagus nerve. Jen clearly has lower cortisone than she does cortisol, which is the aches and pains, which is not feeling so great. That was where you were talking about the ankles and things of that nature. And this is where I usually will go into, okay, we got to take care of your cortisol to let your cortisone come up to where it needs to be to help retrain your system. What Jen and I haven't done yet, and this is, she's going to learn about this right now, is we're probably going to head into more vagus nerve training stuff for her to help the nervous system reset itself, because so many women, we get stressed for so long, we start to beat ourselves up about our changes in our body, and then we end up in a state where our nervous system doesn't know what's a bear, if we're the bear, if life's the bear, if it gets very confused, and then we'll have issues with being able to control inflammation on a daily basis. And so this is something we really want to be thinking about on this level. So yeah. So that's that one. Any other questions there?
Nope, that wasn't a question. I was just gonna say, and we can kind of go into like what we've done and the process, but I will say that like it really is kind of trial and error and figuring it out. And even just like with the cortisol and figuring out the nervous system, it has taken like step by step, because I think, and I used to always tell people, I'm like, listen, you cannot ashwagandha your way out of stress. Like that doesn't quite work like that. It is lifestyle. And we worked on some lifestyle things, which I thought I was already doing a pretty decent job. And it's taken some time, but like even being able to take adaptogens during the day, where a lot of people can do that and it just calms their nervous system, I can't. Like I've tried multiple times to try different times of day, different things, and they always just make me super drowsy and super tired. And then I've also taken some that I tried to take at night and they woke me up. So it's like, it really is just kind of figuring out what you're going to tolerate. And it is a little bit of trial and error.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, and that's, that's where I try to go to the vagus nerve and start to do some targeted breath work, targeted heart rate variability stuff, targeted that department. That's a whole nother webinar. But in this case, we're looking at the B12 here, because this is telling us how Jen can methylate, meaning detox through the cells. We're looking at B6, glutathione, biotin. We're looking at all the different markers. Which is even cool here in the Dutch is that we even have a marker for how leaky someone's gut may be, which is awesome. And dysbiosis in particular too. So it's kind of cool to see that. And then you have your neurochemicals like dopamine and this norepinephrine, that's precursor to cortisol too, since they're your adrenaline. And then the quinoline, Nate, this is what I was talking about, that inflammatory molecule that we make that is related to cancer. And then oxidative stress, this guy here can tell us like how much of free radicals are we creating within our body because this 8OH tells you, like, if your mitochondria, so those factories in all your cells that help you make energy, they're also telling you, can those guys that are making energy take the trash out? And it might be another reason why you're fatigued, because if your cells are building up with trash, you can't make energy effectively. And so that's another cool one there. So really for Jen, she's needs some dopamine hits here. And then she also has the low end of the melatonin, which of course could be possibly some of the sleep component there too. So we didn't go specifically into melatonin with her, but since you're already sleeping better, I feel good about not having gone there.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah. And so then the rest of the test is just, they give you, like, you guys can see, they just give you details. So I'm not going to pop in there. You might have seen that. So yeah. All right.
So
What else you
I
guys
know
got?
that's a lot, right? Hopefully this starts to make sense. My whole goal was for you guys to see the big picture of what's possible and to show you that, like, these just knee-jerk reactions of like, your labs are fine, it's part of aging. No, it's part of aging is your hormones dropping off, but that doesn't mean that that's how you have to live. And so I want to make sure you guys have the information you need to be able to go to your primary physician and say, this is what I want. Now, they may not run everything, but that you can get a lot of it through them, and then we can fill in the gaps. But I really just, my whole goal is just to have women feel more empowered in being able to take control over their own health. And I hope that that helps you guys with that. While we're wrapping up, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the box and I will shoot them over to Dr. K if we want to wrap up with some last minute questions. I will say, yes, it has been a transition. I think the big ones that we started with was the progesterone. We started with the troches. That did not work out. And then we moved to evening primrose oil, and I'm doing fine on that. I have found kind of the perfect cocktail with magnesium. I'm doing the cortisol manager at night now, and that's helping me sleep throughout the day. I figured out when I need to take it at night so that I'm not groggy in the morning. And so like nighttime, like I'm doing a lot better there. We did the happy lamp in the morning to help get my cortisol up in the morning to kind of raise it first thing, so I wasn't so tired. And then I've just been managing that. So it's been definitely a work in progress, but I can tell you and there's still things that we want to do. And we also started testosterone. I'm like, hey, I want to get my testosterone up. I'm a testosterone girl. Like, I want to feel that. And that has helped with my libido. It has made a big difference, but we also have had to play with that. And there are options with that. And I actually am not taking as much as I thought that I would need to feel good and to have a healthy libido. That's like your vibrancy hormone, right? So it really is about going, okay, this is where I'm at. What are the next steps? And you just kind of keep layering things in and going, okay, let's deal with the major ones first, get those. And then sometimes things kind of correct themselves when certain hormones are starting to balance out. But it is a work in progress. And I'm so grateful that that my client found you, that I get to work with you. And I do obviously refer all of my clients to Dr. K, and hopefully I think you guys can see why. Because she's very informative, very thorough, and really gives you the tools you need to take back your health. So any questions, any last minute thoughts from you, Dr. Krause?
I think probably the biggest thing was that I did want to mention about the testosterone and needing to adjust it a little bit and adjusting the hormones, because I think a lot of people, and I know we've had a couple folks in your group who have went to clinics that were specializing in hormones. And unfortunately, there is this concept out there of like, it's one size fits all. Everybody gets the same protocol and everybody's kind of dosed a little bit higher than I believe we should be. And I'm conservative on my hormone dosings. Jen and I were kind of like going back and forth. She's like, no, I'm doing it this. Okay. Let's try it. See what happens. I'm here to meet you guys where you're at, but I think the really, really big thing is if you go into a clinic and they're giving you something for every little thing that's going on, and it seems like it's very cookie cutter, just be aware. It may work for you. It may not. And I think that's the biggest thing I want folks to take away, is that this is an individualized medicine. And if you find that someone's treating it very like one size fits all. You want to be careful. And then the other big thing is fight for your health. Fight for your, I always say fight for your right, to party, because I still love the Beastie Boys. But in this case, it's fight for your right for your health, because unfortunately, you'll get blown off pretty easily in the conventional medicine world, that with most docs that, oh, it's just aging, like Jen said. No, if you don't feel right, this is where you need to stand up for yourself. Find a doc who will listen to you. You deserve that. We work for you. That's how this works. So keep that in mind. Mm-hmm.
Even with conventional medicine, finding a doctor who will run these tests, it is challenging. Because at the end of the day, like, you think about how much money you spend on your premiums for insurance, and then go to a doctor and have them say, I'm not going to run these labs. I get why they don't. I know that a doctor cannot run a lab that they cannot treat, and these doctors are not trained in it. So right. I do understand that part of it. But I also understand that this is your health. Like Dr. Krause said, like, you have to fight for your right to be able to take care of yourself. And so if your doctor is not willing to run these tests, you need to find somebody who will. And it is one of the things that I love about working with Dr. Krause, because we actually had a client that and this was it's been probably 4 months or so, and she had gone to one of these clinics. I have done pellets before. She was on pellets, and she gave me her numbers and her testosterone. I was like, whoa, that's really high. That's kind of concerning to me. And I immediately was like, would you please go get this tested? Because I want to make sure that you're metabolizing this and that you're okay before we just keep on rolling with this, because that's a really high number. And she actually did go see Dr. Krause, and she's fine. So far, we're doing good. So it's really just about empowering you to feel and live the way that you want to. So here's a couple of things that I want to make sure and that we leave you guys with. Number one, I think everybody should get tested this way. I think that is very empowering. How can people work with you, Dr. Krause?
Mm-hmm. So if you guys are interested, you can go to my website, Dr. J. Krause ND. So it's KRAUSEND. So N is in Nancy, D is in dog.com. There's a click on there, click to schedule a chat with me. Just put that in, click in there, schedule one. It's 15 minutes. There's no obligation. We just talk, see what's going on, and kind of make a decision from there. If you're like, yes, I really need these labs now, I really want to know about that, let Jen know, or you can email me at Dr. spelled out JKRAUSE@gmail.com, because that way then I can get you into a longer appointment. The 15 minutes, I can get an idea. We can give you enough information if you're kind of just on the fence and wanting to know more. But if you're like, yeah, I really want to get some labs done, I need at least a half hour to 45 minutes with you. So just let me know. And then in terms of the labs, so cost, just to give you guys a little breakdown, the Dutch that Jen had, the Dutch Complete, is $330, so $330. You can resubmit it back to your insurance. Most insurance companies will pay for it, which is kind of cool. And then the other labs, the access ones, were about $150, sorry, give or take, somewhere in there. I can't remember exactly, but 150 is about that one there. And if you have a high deductible plan, I do recommend doing that. That way you get all your information, and there's not that nail biting, oh my gosh, when is my LabCorp bill going to come and what's it going to be? So those are the two ways. And if you want to, follow me a little bit, learn more about what I'm up to, you can go to Instagram at Dr. Jannine, Jannine Krause, Krause, and you get me kind of talking what I see, all the things. And that's what we do. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. So, and I do have somebody that asked, can we get that information? So here's what we're going to do. The replay of this will go out tomorrow, along with the PDF of here are the labs to ask for, conventional versus optimal ranges. I will make sure that all of Dr. Krause's information is included in there, the email, the website. I will say, if you follow her on Instagram, she literally gets on there, is like, here it is. And she will walk you through stuff. So you can learn a ton just from following her on Instagram. It's all free stuff. For those of you who are like, I want the total package, I'm a lifestyle girl. That's what I do. And I basically take you and teach you how the metabolism works and work with hormones in relation to your metabolism. We work on workouts, yes, nutrition, lifestyle factors, and we start with how those hormones affect your metabolism in terms of cortisol, insulin, yes, thyroid, yes, your adrenals, all of those things. And then at some point, like I mentioned, somewhere around 2-3 months, when we've got some of those lifestyle factors under control, then we start to go into testing. And what I've done is I'm relaunching a program that I did like a year and a half ago. It's 40 plus physiques, but I've revamped it, made it way more simple. It's a simplified system, and I'm relaunching it at the end of this month. And I'm so happy because Dr. Krause has agreed to be a part of that. So she will be a face in the group, and we're going to combine it. So you're not only getting the lifestyle factors, but you're also getting access to tests if you choose to do so. So you have the ability to do that. If you're interested, everybody on my email list, which all of you are, because you're here, everybody on my email list is going to get early bird discounts starting on the 18th. So you'll have like I think it's a 48-hour window where you will get a discount, and there will be a couple of options. So if you're interested, be on the lookout for that. Other than that,
Awesome.
I appreciate you being here, Dr. Krause. I appreciate your time so much. I appreciate being able to know that my women that I'm working with, I can just go see her. She's got you, and you fill in the missing pieces. And I know so many women need this. So I really appreciate you jumping on here, and I hope everybody found it useful. I'm getting some good messages that it was. So
My pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah, I'm here to help. I want everyone to be informed. That's the thing. And you're definitely on top of that. So thank you. Appreciate it.
absolutely. All right, guys, thanks for jumping on. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Bye, guys.